All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Road Ahead Municipal Lead Reporting Portal updates, bulk data uploads, APIs, and future enhancements. I'm Gavin Rozzi. I'm the director of our data center here today, and we've got a great presentation lined up to cover some of the latest improvements we are making to the PL 2021 Chapter 182 lead paint inspection reporting process. Next slide, please. And we can go to the next one. So joining us today, our colleague Sherry Malnack, Assistant Division Director here from the Division of Housing and Community Resources. Marie Daniels from the Division of Codes and Standards will provide us with an update on the lead paint inspection law overview and recent developments in that area. And we're also joined from our data center team, Assistant Director Kiana Dunn, as well as Lucas Dole, our front-end web developer from our data center team to cover some of the other enhancements that we've got here. So at the outset, just talking about where we are now and how we got here. We have been doing a series of these webinars since we started the rollout of the lead reporting portal and the other associated features. We have done a stakeholder engagement survey to try to surface some of the concerns out there in the municipal community. And really, at a high level, what we're looking to do today is, in response to some of that stakeholder feedback, outline kind of what our new menu of options is going to look like for bulk data sharing. We have heard you very clearly that there is a concern among municipal folks looking to not have to go one property at a time in the portal. So we've got two really exciting options depending on your level of technical sophistication that we're going to cover there. And then a little bit later in the presentation, our data center team will talk a little bit more about the future roadmap and some of the additional stuff that we have planned for the future here. So we'll also take your questions at the end. So if you happen to have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat as they come up. We will address them at the end and as time allows. We will have a hard stop at 1:30 due to the availability of everybody on the team. Next slide, please. So our goals for today. By the end of this presentation, you should have some familiarity with the reporting requirements under the lead paint inspection law if you're not already familiar with them. And really, the focus of today's session is to really allow everybody here on this call to familiarize themselves with these new options that we have for bulk data sharing. Now, in keeping with, allowing municipalities to have the flexibility to select which one of these options best fits you, not everybody will be able to take advantage of this. I think really there will be a level of technical sophistication required for some of this stuff. So it might be worth having a conversation with your municipal IT department or your software vendor if you happen to have one. But really, this is going to put you in the driver's seat in terms of having the availability to use these tools to not have to go one property at a time and have more of an efficient reporting mechanism. And then lastly, as I had mentioned earlier, we will be discussing our roadmap for future development of the lead portal and some of the other changes that you can expect to see coming down the pipe in the future. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it back to our colleague, Assistant Director Kiana Dunn, who's going to take us through the rest of the program. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Gavin. We have a great program for you, like Gavin said, and so we're just going to get into it just in the interest of time. My name is Kiana Dunn. I'm the Assistant Director, so let's get started. So I'm going to introduce my next colleague, Marie Daniels, and she's going to talk to you about an overview of lead paint inspection law.
Thank you, Kiana and Gavin. Good morning, everybody. So for those of you on this call, you may have seen me before in quite a few of these webinars. I feel like, as this law has gotten closer and closer to its deadline, people feel more familiar with it. I still do like to give a broad brush overview. I think it's helpful to remember why we have this law and what it truly requires. So the one thing I want to point out is that the deadline for inspection is July 22nd of this year. So that is coming up early next week. Just by way of a bit of background, the initial law, PL 2021, Chapter 182, which ended up being further amended in 2024 as Chapter 74, requires inspections for lead-based paint hazards in certain pre-1978 rental dwellings. The inspections are either performed at tenant turnover or within 3 years of the law's effective date, whichever is sooner. So that is that July 22nd, 2025 date. The scope of this law, when we talk about certain pre-1978 dwellings, is single family, two family, and multiple rental dwellings. There are exceptions built in for those multiple rental dwellings, which I'll talk about a little bit. Another piece of the scope, and this was expanded in the 2024 law, is that municipalities may perform the inspections in-house, or they are able to enter into contracts with DCA certified lead evaluation contractors to perform these inspections. That was initially not allowed when first passed in 2021. It was a very strict reading of the law, but we were told that we could not allow those contracts. We can now, as of the 2024 amendments, and that has really broadened the horizon to allow for towns to more easily gain compliance with the inspection requirements. Of course, I don't have it in the bullet points, but one more thing to keep in mind is you can always use shared services as well. I do know of a few towns that use each other to fill gaps or just to get proper coverage to meet the deadline. So that is always an option for the inspection. One other piece to keep in mind is that a $20 fee per inspection must be remitted to DCA for each of the inspections that are undertaken. So some of the exemptions from this law are properties that already have a valid lead safe certification pursuant to this law. Those certifications are valid for a period of 3 years now. So I know in the past I had to spend a lot of time kind of explaining that there was a 2-year expiration for the certificate. So there were kind of a mess for 3-year inspections, but 2-year certificates. That has been clarified. The inspections and the certificates are now on the same 3-year timeline. So the inspections are always occurring cyclically every 3 years, and that certification is valid for that entire time period. So they would be exempt even upon tenant turnover if they had that valid 3-year certification. Another exemption is properties that have been certified to be free of lead-based paint pursuant to NJAC 5:17. That is the lead abatement code that the department also promulgates and adopts. So a lead-free property, according to that law, or that regulation, is exempt from the requirements of this law. It also exempts certain seasonal rentals. That is any seasonal rental that is rented for less than 6 months of the year with non-consecutive leases. And then finally, the multiple dwelling inspection exception is for any unit that has been registered with the Division of Codes and Standards Bureau of Housing Inspection for a period of 10 years with no lead paint violations at the last inspection. We have on our website a database that pulls up all of the multiple dwelling properties that fall under that. So that is right on the Bureau of Housing Inspection's landing page. It is quite a lengthy link, but if anybody needs it, feel free, always please reach out to me. I'm happy to provide that link to you. And of course, it does rely on when we moved from paper to digital files. So as much as we believe the list is as fully up to date as it can possibly be, sometimes due to old paper records, we miss a few. If that's the case, still, please feel free to reach out. We can usually figure out how long the property is exempt for. So if there's any issues kind of navigating that, because I know that is kind of the rub between municipal records and state records, we tend to be able to iron out those details. So I always like to keep that in people's minds. If you have any questions for a multiple dwelling, just 3 or more units, feel free to reach out. We can usually iron out that detail together. And then Kiana, the next slide, please. So the inspections themselves are either a visual assessment of all interior areas or a dust wipe sampling of interior areas taken in accordance with HUD requirements. And that depends on the percentage of children that were tested in a municipality that had an elevated blood lead level. We do utilize data that we get from the Department of Health. We take an aggregate of that data. So we're using the years 2021, 2022, and 2023, averaging them out to get a better, more accurate assessment of what type of inspection needs to be undertaken. And as I noted a little bit earlier, with the changes that were enacted in 2024, these inspections must occur upon tenant turnover or every 3 years, and that every 3 years keeps you in sync with the lead safe certification. Of course, the results are pretty straightforward. If there were no lead-based paint hazards, a lead safe certification can be issued. That property is all good for the next 3 years. The reason we use lead safe certifications, this is a question we still get a lot, is that the visual assessment and the dust wipe sampling are a moment in time, right? They're a snapshot of what that property looks like at the time of inspection. We deem it to be lead safe, but we cannot deem it to be lead free based on just a visual or a dust wipe. So that is why it still triggers a cyclical inspection that is ongoing to ensure that lead safe maintenance practices are carried through over the next 3 years. Of course, if lead-based paint hazards are found, remediation has to occur, either through interim controls or abatement. At that point, re-inspections of the property have to be undertaken with dust wipes, and that is in following with remediation requirements through both 517 and through HUD protocols. They want to be sure that remediation does appropriately clear any lead-based paint hazards that were visible or were found on dust wipe sampling. Interim control remediation results in the issuance of a lead safe certification. That's because interim controls tend to be something to make the property lead safe and not lead free. So in keeping with that, they issue a lead safe certification as a result of interim controls. If an abatement is performed, abatements result in a clearance certification. So that actually fully exempts the property from future lead-based paint inspections. That is one thing to keep in mind, is the difference between the interim controls versus abatement. While abatement is typically much more expensive than an interim control is, it does provide you with the insurance that that is a lead-free property moving forward. So that is really kind of the broad brush overview. I do want to remind people that with the deadline so close, you may see my division. We come to all of the different offices to perform audits pretty regularly. You will be hearing questions about whether you are enforcing this law. If the answer is no, you will probably be hearing from us again to figure out why, especially now that the deadline is coming up. We want to ensure that towns are equipped to carry out these inspections, and if they're not equipped, what issues are still facing them looking ahead. So that is something you will likely expect to hear from us more frequently about, whether you are enforcing and implementing these laws now. And I think that's it for my slides, Kiana.
Okay, thank you so much, Marie, for providing that in-depth overview. Next, we have Sherry, who will provide another overview of LRAP.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well on a Friday. I'm not sure, most of you guys have probably heard me speak before about LRAP, but we have a lot of funds still available. We have grantees, we have 50 grantees across the whole state. And basically, we're looking at units. Actually, the slide needs to be updated. I apologize. We could do up to 10 unit buildings right now. So if you have anyone whose unit has failed inspection and is still within the 30 days for them to remediate or abate, it would behoove you guys to share information about our program. And what I could do is, Gavin, would you be willing to hand out our flyers in both English and Spanish to everybody who's attending today? But again,
Yeah, certainly.
yeah, and we do vacant units too. They don't have to be occupied. The only caveat with the vacant unit is the landlord has to certify that they will rent to a low and moderate income person within a 6-month period. It's a great program. It's a grant. There's really nothing that would preclude a person from getting in as long as they're income qualified. And we do self-certification of income and the unit tests positive. So I'm hoping you guys will share about this great program with whoever fails. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sherry. Next, I'll cover bulk data sharing in the lead reporting portal. And this will be the options that you'll be made available to make your life much easier. So we have quite a bit of material to get through. So buckle your seat. Okay, as required by New Jersey law, each town or city must send a list to the Department of Community Affairs that shows every home was inspected under the law and any home where a lead-based hazard was found needs to be reported. So, and what DCA did is we made it easy. We provided this municipal reporting portal, which is this online system that has been active since July of 2024. And so you can use it whether you're a municipal staff or lead contractor, but the point is that it's supposed to make things easier versus using the paper-based manual systems that have been in place in the past. So if you're a municipality, you must use this portal to stay in compliance. You can designate a software vendor or a lead contractor to submit the data on your behalf through a pilot program. And so the other thing I want to touch on here is the new features. And so we're excited that we'll be launching the tools to make your life easier in terms of providing the upload where you'll be able to upload multiple properties at once. And so this is a great caveat, especially if you're a vendor or a municipality that's doing bulk inspections. And so by having this ability to share the tools to the more advanced users, sorry about that, to the more advanced users, it makes it more of a more convenient way to that you'll be able to be comfortable working with spreadsheets, because you'll see as we get into it. So there are two ways to report large amounts of lead inspection data into the municipal lead reporting portal. So the first is that we have this bulk CSV upload. This option will allow you to upload a single spreadsheet with as little as 2 or hundreds of inspection records at once. And like I said before, this way it's fast, it's simple, and it's great for anyone that's already keeping records when it comes to like Excel or any other format. The other option that we have is for advanced users, and this is with our API submission. Users will request an API key, and through a machine readable method, you can send data system to system and report through the portal. This way, it's without the need of uploading any files manually. And this is what we call automated reporting. So in case you're wondering where to actually find the municipal lead reporting portal, you can navigate to the bottom of the dca.nj.gov homepage, and you'll see the portal there. So for the new features that we'll be discussing today, you can also find them on this grant reporting forms page, and sorry, the notifications. You can find them on this grant reporting forms page, and you can see the CSV uploads as well as the portal corrections, which we'll get into later, as well as the API request. But I just wanted to point out that all of these links are readily available on our website. So now we'll talk about the first feature, the CSV upload. So what you're looking at is the upload page, and this should be used when you have a spreadsheet with multiple lead inspection records to report. And all you'll need to do is download the template and fill out your inspection information, and then you'll upload this file by selecting the select file button there. You'll enter in your email address, and then you'll confirm that you're not a robot. One thing I just want to point out here, and this is what we're drawing your attention to, is, so here's the template as well as the guideline, but where it says DHCR lead test single property upload template. This is not just for one property. This is for, you can do up to hundreds of properties. So I just wanted to kind of make that clear, just in case it wasn't. So next, I'll show you the guideline for filling out the CSV form. So here, are the instructions to help ensure that the spreadsheet is filled out accurately so that you won't be rejected. And so there are a few things to keep in mind here is that you don't want to change the column names or the order because the system relies on a specific format. The other thing is you want to make sure that all the fields are filled out correctly. And the last thing that this guideline is explaining here is that if you're unsure about how a field should be entered, you can test it in our online portal first. Just don't submit the same property in both places. So now let's take a look at the fields that you'll be entering the data into. So here is when you download that template, there are 48 fields. And so this is what the columns will look like. And we thought it would be a great idea to kind of cover this. This way we avoid future errors, and it would be helpful to walk through these fields just so that you have an understanding about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Particularly with formatting, certain of the fields require certain values. We don't want you to have drop-down mismatches. And so this is why we're going to go over this. So for this particular, it's 48 different fields. So we'll just go through them. For affiliation, you'll need to say whether or not you're a municipal staff member or a contracted lead inspector, and you just choose one of the two options. For a contractor name and address, these are only need to be filled out if you're a contracted inspector, and otherwise you would put none in the field. Next is submitter county. So you would enter the county where the property is located, and it has to match exactly with what's in the portal dropdown. And then submitter municipality. So here you would enter the name such as Trenton City or Cherry Hill Township, and this also needs to match the portal dropdown. And so one thing to note here is that your county and municipality names, they must match, otherwise the system will reject it. So you always want to double check that those two are in sync. So next, we'll just go through a few more fields that may trip people up. The submitter phone number. Here we want to use only digits, no dashes. For the submission date, you want to use the month, day, year format, like January 1st of 2025, and you don't need to add the leading zeros. The type of property, choose from a specific list like 1 unit or 2 units, etc. And you only want to use what's allowed. Do not make any custom entries. For owner occupied, you want to enter yes or no, and this field is important because it determines whether or not additional owner related fields will show up or need to be completed. So the next fields capture the results of the inspection and some important details about the household. So if we look at the owner address, this is only required if the property is not owner occupied. If it's a rental, enter the owner's address. If it's owner occupied, you can enter none. For the lead found, you want to enter either yes or no, depending on the hazard that was found during the inspection. For lead safe, indicate whether or not the home received the lead safe certificate by entering just yes or no. For children present, you want to indicate whether or not children live in the home, and you can enter either yes or no data collected, but just be sure that only you use the exact phrases that are there. So next we have the bulk API submission. And so before we get into how it actually works in our system, I just want to kind of put everyone on the same page, just in case some of you aren't familiar with what an API does and what it is and why it's necessary. So an API, it stands for Application Programming Interface. And so you can think of it as like a messenger that allows two systems or programs to talk to each other and exchange information. And why do we use an API? An API lets us carry out specific actions, such as create data, like submitting an online form, or read data, like checking the weather, or looking up a map or stock prices. Or you want to update data, like editing a report, or delete data, removing outdated information. So those are the reasons why you would use an API. And for these basic tasks that an API is made to do is known as CRUD. And that stands for create, read, update, and delete. And in each of those stages, for instance, with create, this is when you send new data, like submitting a lead inspection report. So that's what the API would be doing. Or you're reading data. So this means that you would be getting or retrieving data, like pulling inspection history. Or if you wanted to update the data, and this allows you to edit existing data. So if you were using that correction form that we'll talk about in a bit. And then to delete the data, this is where we no longer have a use for the data, and so we will be removing it. So now that you know what an API does, this is a flow chart that will explain when the system sends an API request, basically that message to the server, what happens. So the server looks at what you are trying to do. Are you trying to create? Are you trying to read? Are you trying to update or delete data? Then it sends back a status code to let you know what happened. And so more often than not, you'll probably see one of these three codes, but there's others, but these are the most commonly used responses that you might see. So 200 means it was a success. So the request was accepted and the data was submitted correctly. 400 means that there's a client error. So it could mean that there's an issue on the user side, there's some missing fields or the wrong formatting was used, but it's on the client end. And 500 is on an issue on the server side, meaning that the system had trouble processing the request. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there was an issue with how the data was sent, but it's an issue on the server side. So hopefully that was helpful. So to submit inspection data directly to the portal, your software team or your vendor that you select that has experience working with APIs, they would have to submit an API request form. And this is what it looks like. And so on this form, there's a portion it says intended use. In this section, we ask some key questions to get a better understanding about the person that will be using this API. So one of the questions that we ask is, how do you plan to use the API? And so here you will provide a brief summary explaining that, well, we'll use the API to submit lead inspection reports directly from our internal system to yours. Or the next one would be, what's your experience with using a JSON REST API? And so the person filling out the form would explain that as well. And what's your plan to keep the data in an API secure? So this, you would include examples like secure login credentials, restrict API access key, or storing it in a secure location. And so what happens is once this request is reviewed and approved, what we do at DCA is we'll issue a unique API key. And this is what you'll use to securely authenticate and submit data to the reporting portal. So here's what an API request confirmation will look like. So once you submit the form, the system will send you an email to confirm the details of that request. And it includes your name, the organization, the affiliation, municipality, the county that you're working in, and the responses of your intended use. And then on our end, the data center team will review your request and follow up with you in a timely manner. So now what's happening behind the scenes with this API? So on the left, you're seeing sample data like name, address, inspection results, but it's in this machine readable format that I talked about. On the right, you're seeing a tool called Swagger Editor, and this is something that developers use to test and interact with APIs before sending real data. It might be a little hard to see, but if you look closely, the sample data on the right includes the same fields we've been talking about, the property address, zip code, ownership information, and so forth. Even though you're not filling out this manually, this shows the exact format your system or the vendor system must follow when submitting data using an API. So if you look, it says post, it's the green rectangle, it says post. So this API is using the post method. And so that means that we are sending new data to the server, because remember there's the CRUD. So now that we've seen what happens when making an API request, let's look to see what happens when we hear back from the server. So this is how our server responds to your API request. When your system sends the data to the portal, the server sends back a status code. And we went over this as we were laying the foundation. And that'll tell us whether or not the request was successful or whether it was not successful. So the 200 is successful, or success, meaning that everything worked, data was submitted. The 400, there was a client error, something was entered wrong, one of the fields mismatched, something was incorrect on the sender side. That's the point. And a 500 error means that there was an issue on the server side. And so the data may be fine, it's just the system couldn't process it for whatever reason. And so these codes are helpful to us because they let us know whether or not the data was submitted or, if we have to do some further investigation. So those were the two methods for bulk data sharing. And so now we're going to turn the page to briefly walk through the correction form. So if you need to correct something, this is the form that will be available for that exact purpose. Right now, there's no option for correcting bulk data though. So if you have to make a correction, it needs to be done and submitted one at a time. But in order to do this, you need to submit or include your submission ID, and you will have this from your original report that will be found in the email. And you also need to include your name, your email, all the pertinent information, exactly how it appeared in the original submission. And this will help us match it with your original submission and update the incorrect information. So here are the links that we've sort of covered from the lead reporting portal, the CSV upload, the API key request, and the correction form. So you'll have that. And so now we're going to talk about something a little more exciting. And this is what we've been working on behind the scenes. This is our lead assistant agent. And in just a moment, I'll ask Lucas to kind of join me, and he's going to do a demo and how this tool actually works. But before Lucas comes on, we just sort of kind of want to tell you what our intentions are behind sharing this. So this is an internal tool that we just wanted to pull back the curtain and show you that yes, government is exploring generative AI tools. The lead assistant is currently in a proof of concept stage. And right now we're just showing you, sort of giving you a glimpse of what's possible. Just want to be clear that human involvement is done at every step of the way using AI at DCA. And so this tool is not taking people's job. It's not replacing anything. The tool is designed to assist, not replace, the important work of the staff, partners, and everyone involved here. It helps with research, speeds up tasks, and finds information quickly, but it does not make any decisions or reviews still remain done with humans. So with that in mind, we're exploring an internal AI agent to assist with lead municipal reporting initiative. The lead assistant was developed to help the Division of Housing and Community Resource staff quickly find answers related to legislation, policy, and guidelines when helping municipal staff, landlords, inspectors, and tenants. Early testing shows real promise in reducing response time and improving efficiency. So with that being said, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let Lucas do the demonstration.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I will share my screen here. And so what we're looking at now is an internal chat that we can ask questions to, and we'll get an answer back using generative AI. And so this is trained on some of the lead laws and some of our publications. So it does have a good working knowledge of a lot of these same laws and everything like that. So for example, we can ask it a question. So let's say, what is the LRAP program in New Jersey? And so when I submit this question, it's going to take a second to think, and it's going to generate a response. So here it's going to tell us about the lead remediation assistance program, and it will give us this text output that we can use. So we can ask this a follow-up question. So let's say, can you explain the lead paint inspection law in plain terms? And so for DCA staff, having this AI that's able to explain some of the more complicated policies and procedures and laws is a really helpful tool and does cut down on some of those response times. Of course, you do want to review to make sure it's accurate, which is why it does cite its sources. So you can go back and actually check the accuracy yourself. But for example, here's a plain language summary of what the law actually does. And so this AI tool allows us to ask certain questions, get answers back, and we aren't ever submitting like personal information or anything that would be sensitive data, but we are able to use this to explain, get some details about how some of this legislation works. And so I'll ask it one final question just to show it has a good enough knowledge. So we'll say, what is the deadline? Or yeah, what is the deadline for lead inspections? And so here you can see one of the things that we'd have to check. So it says 2024, July 22nd, 2024. And so this is why this is not a public-facing tool. It does make mistakes. It is not always perfect. And that is why we also have this disclaimer saying it's general guidance and not legal advice. So you do have to review what the output is saying so that you can make sure it's accurate. But it does use the materials that are provided to do a pretty good job of summarizing and explaining. So that's pretty much it for the lead assistant. We do expect to keep using this internally, making it better, and helping our staff respond to questions even faster.
Thank you so much, Lucas. That was really cool. Let me go back to sharing. Okay. So next, Gavin's going to take us on a roadmap for future developments.
All right. Thank you, Kiana. And great demonstration, Lucas. And I think, just to dovetail some of that stuff with the AI assistant and where we go from here is, we wanted to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and show, just because we don't have a public facing AI product does not mean that we're not using some of these advanced technologies here on the back end. So, what I would say at this point, in terms of our future roadmap and where we're looking to go with this moving forward, importantly, that July 22nd deadline will be coming up. So, after that deadline takes place, I think we're going to be looking at other ways where we can streamline this process a little bit more for you all. I think now that we have some new capabilities here at the data center team in terms of our web development. So I think what we will be doing on the horizon is two important changes that you'll see to the portal. I think we're going to try and consolidate a lot of these forms and various processes all into one kind of streamlined, separate website, just because there is so much more information to unpack. And we're also hoping to have that be accompanied with some of the frequently asked questions that we typically get. And then importantly, another update that I would like to announce is one of the other concerns that we have heard from a lot of people on is, some of the challenges that they have had having to log into the portal, have their information come up each time. As an interim solution back in January, we had announced that we were adding enhanced pre-population to try to streamline things a little bit there. With us needing to function within the state IT environment and comply with all those cybersecurity policies and whatnot, we have to kind of operate within that framework. So after a great deal of kind of back and forth in that regard, we are able to offer user accounts. So that's going to be something new that comes up. So the LED portal is built on top of the department's SimplyGov government enterprise workflow automation platform. And based on some of the recent enhancements that they've made over there, we will be able to provision individual user accounts on that platform to allow municipal staff to be able to submit stuff and not have to keep entering in their information each time. Importantly, that will also open up the possibility of being able to go directly in that dashboard and monitor the status of all of your inspections that you've submitted. So we do have the public facing lead paint inspection law dashboard that I had previously shared in the chat. And because of legal obligations such as Daniel's Law, we are not allowed to publish the full street address of those properties via that dashboard. So the only way we identify those properties is with the tax map, block, and lot identifiers, which are commonly used by municipalities. However, we realize that those tax map identifiers don't necessarily match up one-to-one with a street address. So obviously, working within the limitations that we've got, when we have this new feature that allows folks to log into the portal backend directly, we will be able to provide you only for your municipality. So, if you're a user for municipality A, you will only be able to see the inspections for your municipality and not others. We think this will be another option to kind of help keep tabs and have that 30,000-foot view of where your particular municipality stands from a compliance standpoint. So we don't have a specific timeline of when this will become available. It's something that we are in the early testing phases with. And right now, I would say, contingent on everything going through on our end, these are some updates that we hope to be able to get out to you by the end of the year. We have an on a mailing list that we've been compiling from everybody that has been both submitting stuff on the portal and attending our sessions here. That's how you were notified about today's session. So what I would say is, keep your eyes on your email inboxes. We'll be announcing some of this stuff once it's ready for you to start using. But I think, between those two adjustments, I think ultimately this will create a more user-friendly experience. We have to work within the way that the law is written. The legislature legislates a lot of these things in terms of deadlines and specific structures of the reporting. We don't really have discretion to adjust or change further. So, working within those confines, we are aiming to try to make this as frustration-free as possible. So, I think that will wrap up our future roadmap. And I think at this time, Kiana, I think we'll be ready to start the Q&A. So we've been answering some of your questions in the chat. But if anybody would like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand, and Kiana will call on you and unmute you. Or if you're going via the chat, we will try to address those questions as they come in. Thanks.
Thank you, Gavin. That was a great job. Oh, okay, let's see if I can. Shane has his hand raised.
All right.
Shane, can you speak?
Hey, how's everybody doing today? A quick question. So a lot in the slides, it mentions talking about the validity of the lead safe certificates, how they're good for 3 years or upon tenant turnover, whichever occurs first. I just want to get clarification. The law reads, therefore, all such units shall be inspected for lead-based paint hazards the earlier of every 3 years or upon tenant turnover, except that an inspection upon tenant turnover shall not be required if the owner has a valid lead safe certification. I just think it's confusing to keep, and we've run into issues. So we're an inspection company. We've run into issues where municipalities and landlords are telling us that they're requiring an inspection every turnover, which is just should not be the case if there's a valid 3-year lead safe certificate. So the language in some of the slides can just come off as confusing for people because it says 3 years or upon tenant turnover, whichever is first, but that's really not true. So can we get clarification on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I think it's something that used to be more convoluted when there was like the 2-year validity, and now that it's 3 years, it seems like it's more of just a roundabout way of saying they're going to happen every 3 years, unless something were to happen and that lead safe certification is now invalidated because they found lead through some other process. That's definitely language we can clarify. We are currently undertaking proposals to our regulations about the lead-based paint law, and I'm working on revising the guidance. So we can definitely add more, I think, simple language to state that really is it's an every 3-year inspection now, to be put quite simply, unless something were to happen that invalidates the lead safe certification.
And just curious to follow up on that, what could occur that would invalidate it?
It would really be something where if there was another inspection that was undertaken not pursuant to this law, so say a child was tested and going through that process through referrals to the health department, it was found that there was lead in the home, then of course we still wouldn't consider that property lead safe. And that would be something that the town would have in its records, that a follow-up inspection under another program showed that there was a lead hazard found on the property. So it really would be kind of a niche situation.
Understood. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Let's see who else we have. We have Kevin. Okay, Kevin, I'll unmute you. Kevin, are you? Kevin, can you speak?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So just two questions. I kind of came in about 20 minutes late, embarrassingly, and um I missed the first portion, the first couple of slides. These slides are they going to be available anywhere?
Yeah, great question, Kevin. So, the recording of this will be available and it will be sent out to everybody after the fact, and we'll also be providing copies of the slides as well. So, no worries there.
Okay, excellent. And the second question is the AI Azure. Is this for municipal staff or this is going to be open to the public?
I'm happy to
So
answer this one.
yeah, go ahead, Lucas.
So this is not currently intended to be used outside of DCA. So this is an internal tool that we are using and we're testing to improve our staff's response times and kind of clarify some of the legislation questions and legislation related questions. But as of now, it is not currently open to municipal staff or the general public. Although if we may be building other things in parallel, that could be at some point in the future. But as of now, it is not.
I do got one last question. I'm sorry, one last question. Um, the I guess the portal, is this being used for outside contractors or is this for municipality?
Yeah, so I'll take that. So, the way the law has been written, in the eyes of the law, the reporting obligation falls on the municipality. However, for the convenience of municipalities, DCA has made it where if you are a certified lead evaluation contractor that's doing work on behalf of a municipality, you may have your contractor submit the inspection details via the portal on your behalf. But the way that that works is that's a contractual arrangement between your municipality and that certified lead evaluation contractor. DCA really does not get involved between you and your contractor. So if you would like to have your contractor do that reporting on your behalf, that would be something that you would need to work out if you are working with a contractor. If your municipality is doing the inspections in-house and it's municipal inspectors, they would need to utilize one of our options in the portal in order to stay in compliance with the law.
Okay, and this is only for the new lead law. This is not for EBL cases.
Correct. This is for any inspections that were conducted pursuant to the lead paint inspection law.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I see we have another hand raised. Laura Single.
Okay, Laura, you should be able to speak.
Yeah, go ahead with your question, Laura. You can unmute.
Laura, are you still there?
I can speak a little bit too. Laura, I know you have a question in the chat that wasn't answered. I'm not sure if that's the same reason you raised your hand. If it is in the chat, Laura said some contractors are marking their certificates as valid for 2 years, not 3. We should have, I saw there were some issues online where even though we had uploaded the new certificates to say 3 years, some people still had the 2-year. That really should be largely ironed out by now. If you see contractors that are still issuing certificates for 2 years, can you please feel free to flag that to me? My office can reach out to them and see, what's going on there, just clear up any confusion that was there. I'll put my email in the chat, but feel free to notify us of any of those instances that arise. We should have most people on the 3-year certificates. That's been uploaded online for all of our forms.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question? I think we covered them all, at least.
Okay, great. Well, I think we'll be able to end a little bit early and give everybody some time back on this Friday. Nope, we have two more
Okay.
questions in the
Two
chat.
that came in. Laura stated some residents hire other companies to do the inspection. Are they submitting to the state? Are they paying the fee? So that is where things do become a little bit more convoluted. In those instances, it's still on the residents to get that, or the contractors that they're hiring to get that information to the town. If you suspect or hear that there are any instances where a resident has hired somebody and they've not given either the lead safe certification, the report, or the final results to you, including the fees, again, please report that to us. It is ultimately the municipality's job to oversee that residents are doing the right thing, but the department would like to be aware of any instances where, especially for the department reporting, something is missing, or for the inspection fees, something is missing between situations where the owner has elected to hire their own contractor. That's absolutely something that we'd like to have brought to our attention for these specific instances. And another question for what about the certificates that have already been issued prior to this change and have the 2-year expiration? For those, since they were issued in the time before the 3-year expiration was established, those are only good for 2 years. So those, as they are phased out, do have to follow the 2-year expiration, unfortunately. So that's kind of a prospective. If you see that it was issued prior to September of 2024, it will have that 2 years, and that is the expiration for that certificate.
Maria, it looks like we got a couple other.
We've got a few questions. I
right.
see receiving certificates and no $20 fee. If you could still, I know it might be kind of a hassle to dig through your records, but if you could provide me with further information on that. I think that there's been some confusion about submission of the fees that was happening early on, so I'd love to start to get to the bottom of it. Because it is required to be submitted, but I'd love to not have anybody in an uncomfortable position trying to figure out what happened with that $20. So that could be some future guidance we need to put out about, any fees that were missed and what's happened. We don't have a standard form that gets submitted with the $20 fees, but I will be dropping in the chat how to submit the fee. It's remitted quarterly, and it's deposited into our Lead Hazard Control Assistance Fund. Allow me to grab that link for you real fast with that information. And I know that was very fast and kind of a whirlwind of me reading the chat, but I think that covers everything.
I think so.
Okay, well done. I guess I can go ahead and close this out, right? Unless there's no other questions or comments. So we just want to thank everyone for attending this this webinar designed to provide a bit more resources for you, tools that you can use to upload bulk data more efficiently. And I just want to thank my colleagues, Marie, Sherry, Gavin, and Lucas, that joined me on this call. They did a great job covering the topics as well as answering your questions that you have. If you do have future questions here, we do have one more page. Whoops. Can you guys still see the PowerPoint? You can? Okay. I just need to find it. Okay. We do have so here is if you have additional questions, you can send them here to leadlawreporting@dca.nj.gov. And then we also have all of our contact information here. And so, like Gavin said, you'll get a copy of the webinar as well as the slides that you'll have. And if there's nothing else, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy this beautiful Friday. Hopefully we don't get any rain. And let us know if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.